top level between the three of you gentlemen. I think you'll help us, especially on the wine side as well, just to understand what those influences are. Yeah, Johannes?
I mean, I did all of my training abroad and was very lucky to, after that, similar to Wandile, to work in some of the, under some of the world's greatest chefs and kitchens and really, work in a high pressure environment. And then coming back, we had a couple of different ideas on how we wanted to showcase our ideas of Durban and its food, its people, and basically it kind of, it's been a process, but the way that it's kind of developed is that our focus really lies on one side, showcasing our geographical location, because it's just super unique here in the subtropics on the east coast of Southern Africa. And on the other hand, obviously, nostalgia plays a huge role, and I think those are things that memories that no one can take from us. Growing up, experiencing, tasting things when the world was still carefree and trouble-free, and I think those are also the things that from a tourism point of view we really want to share, and the things that I look for when I go out and visit different places, that I want to experience the location, I want to experience its people, I want to experience its ingredients and its flavors.
Yeah, so for gastronomy, I think the perfect explanation for it is the science of food and drink, and that's gastronomy itself. Obviously, over the years it's evolved, and it's something that was not invented, but became very popular in France, and I happen to have classical training in French cuisine. So I got to understand, I think, the ethos of gastronomy in total. But coming back to South Africa and understanding our culture as well, and around Africa, which I think we shouldn't just close it off to South Africa, should open up to the entire continent. There's so much more to offer, and it sort of changes what gastronomy really means to us. And a big part of gastronomy within the African continent, I think, is storytelling, like Chef Johannes says, nostalgia, and really tapping into your culture and championing your culture. I think it's great that we have a lot of Italian restaurants, Japanese, French, but we would like to see more South African-based restaurants championing South African culture, championing South African heritage and indigenous ingredients as well. And to get to a point where we can sell a dish, for example, that's made from samp or sorghum, a humble ingredient, and sell it at a very high price and make it valuable throughout the world. And because that's what the Italians have done. The Italians have taken rice and cheese and put it together and called it risotto, and then literally sold it to you for an arm and a leg. So I think that's the level that we need to get to. But South African gastronomy is something that I am still figuring out.
What's the equivalent of risotto, African risotto?
I'd say samp and beans.
Samp and beans, right? So now we all know, please record that. The official equivalent is samp and beans, okay? I want to move quickly with you, and I think maybe you can just help us start just answering some of these questions in terms of how we're going. But what do tourists seek when they want to eat in SA or experience SA wines? What do we think that feature is, or what do you think that is? And do you think that we as a country are giving it to tourists?
Yes, so thank you for that question. I think if we just think about gastronomy as kind of the starting point, when people visit South Africa, in my opinion, what they want to experience is they want to experience the local people, the local cuisine, the local culture. And quite often in the wine space, we talk about a concept called terroir. We talk about where does grape come from, the soil, the people, the grape, the environment around it, and what experiences that bring. And wine, in essence, over time, has become such a big influence in restaurants and food and wine pairing. But essentially, what I want to finish off this kind of thinking is that gastronomy for me is leaving your heart on the plate, leaving your heart in the glass, and leaving your heart on the floor. And when you do that right in your establishment, you are going to be great.
Lovely. Johannes, back to you. Now, how does your work use food to tell the story of kind of where you come from? I know there's an international influence. I know there's the Durban influence of growing up here. But kind of how have you brought that together, onto a plate, and to have a unique story to tell?
Well, my journey in food really starts with the love for produce, and I think that especially here in KZN and in Durban and surrounds, we're really spoiled with that, because we don't have these superlative luxury ingredients at our disposal to the largest extent. Yes, we get truffles in from the southern Drakensberg, which is one of the rare luxury ingredients that we work with, but otherwise, like Wandile was saying, everything has very humble roots and origins, and that's really where the uniqueness lies. On the one side, you've got the subtropics of the Indian Ocean, where you get, all of the more subtropical crops like mangoes, lychees, madumbe, those kind of things, and then you walk or you move.
Yes, he did say dumbe.
Yeah, it's a staple, especially now when it's in season on our menu. And then moving direction Drakensberg, where it gets more moderate from a climate point of view. We get beautiful things like venison. We get trout from the Drakensberg. We get all of our more continental produce from organic farms up in the Midlands area, and so on and so forth. And I think it's really rare to have all of these ingredients and those kind of facets together, coming in the same kind of location. And that's why we've also a couple of years ago limited ourselves to working within a 100-kilometer radius around Summerhill, so we can really focus on that and tell that story. And I think it's the only place in the world, for instance, where porcini mushrooms and mangoes share the same season. And I think that's something that's unique and obviously helps us delve into the geographic location of the story that we're trying to tell.
Yeah, and I think maybe to the both of you as well, I think there's a color line in terms of dining and the kind of the culture of dining. If you look at the culture of dining of KZN versus your Johannesburg versus Cape Town, there's a very maybe missing element of culture dining within the KZN space. And maybe I'll start with you because you are here, and I think if one is comparing, we can say, why do you think that is?
Well, I think there's obviously, when we met a couple of years back, there were obviously large ideological parallels that we had, and that we from a culinary point of view, that's what our life is about. So we've got to focus on that. And that's kind of where things started from in that regard. And I think for us, when we started, everyone thought that we were crazy trying to open a fine dining restaurant in KZN focused on local, inspired by Durban, essentially, completely inspired by Durban and KZN. And before that, you had maybe Wolfgat and Paternoster that was focusing on South African ingredients and South African culture. But otherwise, in the fine dining scene, it was completely unheard of. Everyone was cooking with European ingredients, putting them together in similar constellations that you would have in Europe, and cater for a hugely European market. And I think that's where we have definitely gone different directions, but with the same ethos or goal rather at the end, which is really trying to be role models for young up-and-coming chefs and also the industry to showcase and be proud of the heritage that we have here.
Yeah, so I agree with Johannes, but as I said, and this is advice to you guys as well, some of you do know, we one of the first chefs to do this. It's very challenging and difficult, so don't ever be the first person to do something, but it's something that I keep learning about and I keep discovering. I keep learning the country that I grew up in. I spent over 10 years overseas between America, New York, Miami, and Paris as well. And it always takes an outsider to see what's happening inside. So when I came back to the country or to the continent itself, I actually realized that this is literally a gold mine. And figuratively, it's a gold mine. And the fact that there's so many things that are not in place yet gives us an opportunity to create those things and instill those things that are in place, which one of them is South African or African gastronomy, as we call it. I believe that in 10 years' time, it's going to change the scene. The Western Cape is known for great restaurants and great chefs, which is true. But I think that we need more African representation as opposed to, telling another European story or an Italian story or a Japanese or a Thai story. We have the Indian Ocean, we've got the South Atlantic, we've got the Indian heritage, which is very huge in terms of food itself. The Indian spice route is what created the world as we know it, and people being displaced and living in different places. So the Indian influence, the indigenous people, we got the Cape Malay people that came in as well. And we got the desert in the north. We've got so much content to really play with. I don't think that we should be recreating another European experience, but it is going to take time. So far, so good. And we hope that in the decade, it changes the entire gastronomy scene, which will change the economy, which will change tourism as well.
I think that's great, and I think one powerful thing about that is that we have to start a culture of doing it and stick to that culture and not kind of, as we were, sell out to the European style. But I think one other big conversation is about kind of wine education and kind of how do we look at wine as, for me, wine is a tricky thing in that, so many people still need to, there's so much wine to still discover. And I think it's about different people. I mean, in your restaurant, even if it's a 25-seater, how do we look at, people experiencing through your menu? We get to a point where we have very large wine menus because you want to include kind of everyone. But I'm trying to find kind of how do we transform and build a legacy using wine and kind of say, we're getting to the signature taste or the signature standpoint of South Africa, and this is what we want to take across.
Yes, thank you very much for that question. I think for a long time in South Africa, wine has been seen quite isolated. And when you spoke about wine, you needed to have this sort of French terminology of explaining it, and the scarcity of being true and authentic in what you smell. And I quite often say to people, when you taste wine and you smell wine, it is such a personal thing. Because if you've never smelled apples in your life, are you going to agree with the fact that the wine advisor or the sommelier tells you to smell apples? You're never going to smell it because you don't know what it smells like. But that learning and comfortability for wine educators needs to come from a place of knowing who they are authentically, knowing their environment, and how their senses, which has been trained through that environment they grow up, how that reflects in wine. And so when we look at a grape is a grape. When you pick it and you press it, it's grape juice. The flavor phenolics develop as you ferment, use yeast, use the skin yeast, in the barrel, what oak you use that gives different flavor components, and the environment that you're in. If I'm going where my location is at the most southern tip, because of the influence from the ocean and the wind, I get high acids. And high acids in my grapes are going to give me a lot more greener character. So I always teach students to say, when you smell a wine, ask yourself, do I smell green or yellow? And if you answer that question, then you say, if I smell yellow, it's tropics. If I smell green, it's more the limes. So to make it a lot more simpler, because we've been too far trying to sound fancy with terminology, rather to make it simple so that you introduce wine at a place that meets the other person. Because what do you want to achieve? You want the person sitting on the opposite side, pairing the food and the wine, to have an amazing experience where they walk away and go, I get it. And if they leave and they go out there confused, then you might not see them back. And that is the true essence of food and wine pairing, is bringing two ingredients together to create an explosion of flavors, authenticity, a sense of place, and an emotion and feeling that celebrates that moment.
That's interesting. Yeah, it's taken to another place. I remember in my previous life, Wandile and I used to do some from food and whiskey tasting. And I think from your comment now, I'm just looking for kind of how do we feel maybe food and beverage, maybe especially from a brand side, your whiskeys and your wine chefs. What do you think that the wine guys or the whiskey guys are not getting when they are coming to create experiences with you? And how should they be approaching you to create, what is the context that they should look at when creating collaborations of that matter, like whiskey or wine and food pairings?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, we need to drop pretense,
Yeah.
I mean, indulgence is the essence behind what we do, and you want to really enjoy it, and you're not going to enjoy it if it's stiff and, there's a lot of pretense involved. You want to be able to sit down, relax, and really focus on the experience that's unraveling around you, and that applies to wine, and you don't need to have a fancy somm who's now talking to you only in French terminology, it needs something that ideally it needs to be a good mix of educated and knowledgeable, as well as approachable, and I think that's really, always been our focus and our approach to food, as well as the wine program that we run, is that it's approachable and people can, drop their guard and wind down and just relax and enjoy what we're offering and enjoy the ride. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think we've tried everything. We've worked with whiskey before. We were still with a whiskey brand. We've done wine, we've done champagne, we've done cocktail pairing. We've gone as far as even brewing our own umkomboti within our restaurant. We've gone as far as also fermenting our own acha at the restaurant. We use acha oil to put it in cocktails. We also ferment our own what we call khamer, which is my grandmother's recipe, and we use that in cocktails as well. So we really try everything, but we try more to keep it local, as opposed to using whiskey or cognac. We've got very good brandies in the country, and we got brandies that are also aged from 10 years all the way up to 25 years, and very classy. And now I'm starting to go that route in pairing using local brandies, local winemakers.
In some of our conversations, it seems like the consumer that we want maybe doesn't remember that there's something as authentic as that they can get an experience from. So